Welcome back to the things that bother me. If you've been following through this series, then you've seen the pattern building. We started with episode 1. You can be anything, the promise. Then episode 2, the latchkey generation, where we learn to stand on our own early. Episode 3, the ladder disappears, where the path forward stopped being clear. Episode 4, the college gamble, where doing what you were told didn't guarantee anything. And episode 5, the squeeze generation, where the pressure from both sides became real. And now we hit episode 6, the safety net is shrinking. This is where everything underneath those episodes starts to show itself. Because all of it, the independence, the pressure, the risk, it all assumes there's something there to catch you if it goes wrong. But what if there isn't? What if that safety net we were never supposed to rely on is barely there anymore? If you've been feeling like the margin is gone, like recovery is harder, like one hit carries further than it used to, you're not off. You're seeing it clearly. Let's get into it. Generation X. The safety net is shrinking. Episode 6. There was never a clear moment where everything changed. No headline, no announcement, no single event you could point to and say, that's when it broke. What happened was quieter than that. Slower, more subtle, almost invisible if you weren't paying attention. But Generation X has lived long enough to feel the shift, even if we didn't see it happening in real time. We grew up in a world that wasn't perfect, but it had structure. There were expectations that made sense. You worked, you earned, you struggled at times, but there was a baseline. A level of stability that didn't guarantee success, but gave you something to stand on. And underneath it all, there was an assumption. If things went wrong, you wouldn't just disappear into nothing. There was something there to catch you. We didn't depend on that safety net. That was never our style. We were raised to be independent, to handle things ourselves, to figure it out without waiting for help. But even independence operates differently when there's a backstop in place. It changes how much risk you take. It changes how far you're willing to go. It changes how hard you fall. Now that backstop is fading. And what makes it dangerous isn't just that it's shrinking. It's that most people don't fully realize how much it's already gone until they need it. Until something breaks, something shifts, something goes wrong. And there's nothing there to absorb the impact. This isn't about panic. It's about recognizing reality for what it is. Because once you understand that the safety net isn't what it used to be, you stop moving the same way. Section 1. The unwritten contract. Generation X didn't grow up with guarantees. We grew up with patterns. We observed how life worked through the people around us. Parents who held steady jobs. Households that, while not perfect, were consistent. Communities that didn't feel like they were constantly on the edge of collapse. That observation became our understanding of how the world operated. There was an unwritten contract embedded in that understanding. Not something spoken, but something implied. If you showed up, if you put in the effort, if you stayed consistent, you could maintain a level of stability. You might not get ahead quickly, but you wouldn't fall behind permanently either. There was a sense of equilibrium. What's changed isn't just the outcome, it's the contract itself. The expectations stayed the same, but the results no longer match. People are doing the same things, sometimes more, sometimes better, and getting less in return. That disconnect is where the illusion starts to crack. Section 2. When stability stopped sticking. There was a time when stability, once achieved, tended to hold. It wasn't immune to disruption, but it had weight. It took something significant to knock it loose. Losing that stability was the exception, not the norm. Now stability doesn't stick the same way. It's lighter, more temporary, easier to lose and harder to regain. You can build something over years and watch it unravel in months, or less. And once it slips, climbing back to the same place feels steeper than it used to. This isn't about individuals failing. It's about the conditions around them changing. Stability has become something you maintain constantly, not something you secure and keep. And that shift changes the entire equation. Section 3. The moving baseline. One of the most overlooked changes is the way the baseline keeps shifting. What used to be enough no longer is. Costs rise, expectations increase, and the definition of stability moves just out of reach every time you get close to it. Generation X has adapted to this by doing what we've always done, adjusting. Working more, cutting back, finding ways to stretch what we have. But adaptation only works when the target eventually stops moving. Right now, it doesn't. So the effort increases, but the result stays the same, or worse, it declines. And over time, that creates a gap between what you're putting in and what you're getting back. That gap is where the pressure builds. Section 4. The loss of margin. There used to be a buffer, a space between stability and collapse. A margin that allowed for mistakes, setbacks, or unexpected events without everything falling apart at once. That margin was never huge, but it existed. Now that margin is almost gone. Generation X is operating in a reality where one disruption can trigger a chain reaction. A single expense leads to debt. Debt leads to stress. Stress impacts performance. Performance affects income. And suddenly, what started as a manageable issue becomes a full-scale breakdown. The safety net used to catch you before you hit bottom. Now, for many, it only appears after the damage is already done, if it appears at all. Section 5. The cost of self-reliance. Self-reliance has always been a defining trait of Generation X. We learned early not to wait for help, not to expect rescue, not to assume anyone else was going to solve our problems for us. That mindset built resilience, but it also masked a deeper issue. Because self-reliance works best when it's a choice, not a requirement. When the safety net shrinks, self-reliance stops being a strength you use. It becomes a condition you're forced into. And that changes its impact. It's no longer about independence. It's about necessity. And necessity carries weight. It removes flexibility. It removes options. It turns every decision into something that matters more than it should. Section 6. Help that feels out of reach. Support systems still exist, but they don't function the way people assume. Accessing help now often requires navigating complexity, meeting strict conditions, and investing time and energy that many people simply don't have. For Generation X, this creates a strange dynamic. We're used to handling things ourselves, but now even when help is needed, it feels difficult to reach. Not impossible, but distant enough that it doesn't feel reliable. And that perception matters. Because a safety net you don't trust is almost the same as not having one at all. Section 7. The mental shift. Living in a world with a shrinking safety net changes how you think. It affects how you plan, how you assess risk, and how you approach the future. Decisions become more cautious, more calculated, more focused on avoiding loss rather than pursuing growth. Generation X has adapted to this mentally as much as financially. We think differently because we have to. We anticipate problems earlier. We prepare for outcomes we used to consider unlikely. But that constant awareness comes at a cost. It adds pressure, not dramatic, not always visible, but steady. And over time, that pressure reshapes how you experience everyday life. Section 8. When independence turns into isolation. There's a fine line between being independent and being isolated, and the shrinking safety net has pushed many people closer to that line. When support systems weaken, responsibility doesn't just stay the same, it expands. You're not just managing your own stability, you're compensating for the lack of external support. And that creates a sense of carrying more than you were ever meant to carry alone. Generation X is familiar with handling things independently, but independence without backup eventually starts to feel like isolation. And isolation changes how you move through the world. Section 9. Watching the pattern continue. One of the clearest signs that this isn't temporary is watching it happen to the generations that follow. The same patterns, the same struggles, but with fewer resources and less stability to start from. Generation X is in a position to see both sides. We remember what things were like before the shift, and we see what they look like now. That contrast makes the direction undeniable. This isn't a cycle that resets. It's a trajectory, and it's moving in one direction. Section 10. Resilience under strain. Resilience is often treated like something that grows endlessly. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. But in reality, resilience is also something that can be depleted. Every adjustment, every setback, every recovery draws from the same internal reserve. And Generation X has been drawing from that reserve for decades. The question isn't whether we can keep going. We can. The question is how sustainable it is to keep operating under increasing pressure without anything reinforcing the structure around us. Section 11. Seeing the system clearly. There's a shift that happens when you stop assuming the system will hold. You start seeing things more clearly, not through expectation, but through observation. Generation X has reached that point. We understand now that stability isn't guaranteed, that systems can change without warning, and that the structures we once relied on are not as solid as they appeared. That awareness isn't comforting, but it's accurate. And accuracy changes how you make decisions. Section 12. Standing without assumptions. The safety net may be shrinking, but Generation X hasn't stopped moving forward. If anything, we've adapted in ways that reflect a deeper understanding of reality. We no longer assume stability, we build for uncertainty. We don't rely on systems, we navigate around them. We don't expect protection, we prepare for impact. That shift isn't easy, but it's real, and it's where we are now. Section 13. Work requirements. Running out the clock. There's another layer to this that doesn't get talked about enough, and it hits Generation X directly. The expectation now isn't just that you work hard. It's that you keep working. Longer. Later. With fewer breaks, fewer supports, and fewer second chances. The timeline has stretched. Retirement isn't what it used to be. The idea of slowing down in your late 50s or early 60s has been replaced with a quiet understanding. You may need to keep going until 64 or beyond just to maintain basic stability. Not to get ahead, not to build wealth, just to hold your position. And if something goes wrong along the way, that's where the reality gets sharper. Because the assistance that's supposed to bridge those gaps is limited, tight windows, strict rules, short durations. You're not looking at long-term support. You're looking at fragments. Maybe a few months of help stretched across years of need. 3 months of assistance every 3 years doesn't stabilize anything. It delays the fall for 3 months, which means the expectation shifts back to you. Figure it out. Again, at an age where the margin for error is already gone. At a point in life where recovery takes longer, options are fewer, and the system is less forgiving. At the point you may not find a job. This isn't about laziness. It's not about unwillingness. It's about the reality of being required to sustain output in a system that offers less support the longer you stay in it. You're not just working to move forward anymore. You're working to not fall behind, right up to the edge. In closing, there's a difference between believing something is there and knowing whether it actually is. Generation X grew up with a belief in a system that, while imperfect, had structure. That belief shaped how we approached life, how we worked, how we planned, how we moved forward. It wasn't blind trust, but it was enough to create a sense of stability. That sense is gone, not because everything collapsed at once, but because over time, the foundation changed. The support weakened, the margin disappeared, and what was once reliable became conditional. We didn't stop moving. We adapted. We add just to new conditions, recalibrated expectations, and kept going even as the ground shifted beneath us. But adaptation comes with awareness, and awareness brings clarity. The safety net isn't what it used to be, and it's not going back. And now there's an added reality layered on top of that. Time itself is no longer on your side the way it used to be. The expectation is to endure longer, produce longer, hold on longer, with less to fall back on if something breaks along the way. That changes the stakes, because it's no longer just about whether the system will catch you. It's about whether you can outlast it. That realization forces a shift. You think differently. You move differently. You stop relying on assumptions and start relying on what you can actually control. You become more deliberate, more aware, more precise in how you navigate what's in front of you. Generation X isn't standing on the same ground we started on, but we are still standing. And that matters, because in a world where the safety net is shrinking and the timeline is stretching, understanding that reality may be the only thing that keeps you from falling further than you can afford to recover from. That's where we're going to leave this one. If this hit you, if you felt that shift, seen it happening, lived through it without anyone ever really saying it out loud, then you already know why this matters. This isn't theory. This is real life, playing out in real time. Generation X isn't guessing anymore. We're seeing it clearly. The safety net is shrinking, the timeline is stretching, and the margin for error is almost gone. And whether people want to admit it or not, that changes how you have to move. If this episode connected with you, don't just watch and scroll. Hit that like so this gets pushed to more people who need to hear it. Drop a comment, because the conversation matters just as much as the content. Share it with someone who's been feeling this, but hasn't been able to put it into words. And if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and do that now. Because this channel, the things that bother me, we're not here to sugarcoat anything. We're here to say what people are already thinking, but not saying out loud. More episodes are coming. This is the things that bother me. Until next time.